Reading 107 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3. Great Amwell House, January 31st, 1948. Internal Considering and Inner Talking. Part 1. We have to struggle with unnecessary emotions. Energy that goes into unnecessary emotions is lost. You see it as raining and feel, say, a sort of hostility or dislike or slight depression. This is unnecessary emotion. People seem to get caught by everything that does not correspond with their expectations. That is, they identify with the fact that it is raining or cold or blowing a gale because they did not expect it. They say, "Tut-tut," and feel a little upset. People seem to expect everything save what does happen. Of course, if you expect an unpleasant thing to happen, and it does happen, your expectation protects you. Again, if you expect an unpleasant thing to happen, and it does not, you are relieved. But, as was said before, most of us seem to have forms of expectation that lead us to expect everything save what does happen. In consequence, a great many unnecessary emotions are made, and a lot of energy is lost in disappointment and internal considering. For a person may even internally consider to such a degree that if it rains on his dear little birthday, he feels the universe and all the hosts of heaven have purposely done it. This is a quite childish attitude, and, as anyone can see, must lead to a lot of unnecessary emotions. A weak being results, easily upset. Now let us speak of internal considering in connection with unnecessary emotions. Internal considering has its source in the emotional center, in this sense, namely, that behind it there is always a feeling, an emotion. It employs the intellectual center in endless words, inner talking, and writing pathetic letters, never or rarely sent. But at its root is a feeling, an emotion. What is this emotion that is the source of internal considering? Let us speak of it gently, for all of us, however grand or brave or hard-boiled we fancy ourselves, have this emotion, this feeling, deep within us, unless by some miracle the love of God has entered into our hearts, and we have come to understand that this earth is a place of test, and that nothing human can understand us. Take the person who feels that it should not rain on his dear birthday. It pours with rain. He considers. He feels sad. He feels something does not appreciate him sufficiently, that he is not rightly treated, that something does not understand him. He was so looking forward to it. This in the work is called internal considering. As I said, it is at bottom an emotion, a feeling, although the intellectual center is employed to voice it in millions of words, spoken or unspoken. He puts on a bright face and says it does not matter. Yes, but inside, the feeling, the emotion continues, and many other similar emotions, from similar experiences, going far back into his past, form a core in his emotional center, from which many other forms of internal considering branch out. As for example, you just missed the bus, and somehow it is always like that, or just when you want to see her, she says she has to go and see her aunt, or you did want to see that play, and they took you to another, and so on. No one, of course, ever listens to what you want. I speak in a trivial way on purpose, because the subject of internal considering is very deep and a serious matter in everyone. For somehow, life is foreign to us. Indeed, it is so deep and so serious that the whole range and power of esoteric teaching through the ages, including the strength of teaching latent in the parables and the Gospels, such as the prodigal son, has not been able to cure humanity of it. Indeed, humanity, unless it begins to awaken from sleep and reach the level of conscious man, can never be cured of it. But one man, one woman, may begin to cure themselves of it by hard work on themselves. So we have to speak of unnecessary or avoidable internal considering. Let us suppose a man does not see his own disloyalty, callousness, and malice. He has never observed himself. He does not see that people dislike or avoid him for this reason. He can see no reason why everyone does not adore him. He then fancies people unfairly do not like him. They behave unfairly to him, so he has a grievance. This is internal considering. A man with a grievance is a good example of internal considering. He never externally considers. That is, puts himself into the situation of other persons and realizes their difficulties. On the contrary, he wishes to put everyone he talks to into his situation, to make them realize his difficulties. And a very boring experience it is to hear them, especially if you are a doctor and are forced to listen to him. Now, this word unfair is, I think, a favorite word in internal considering. Do you see it yourself? Do you not secretly think that everything is unfair? If so, you have an admirable source of continual internal considering, and will lose force every minute of the day. I mean, each day will be a failure from the work point of view. On the other hand, if you observe your typical forms of internal considering and do not identify with them and remember yourself, you will realize that only you can help yourself. And all this internal considering and sense of unfairness is useless and worse and can only give rise to daily emotions which are unnecessary. But let no one think he or she is free from internal considering. Internal considering on one side is defined as making internal accounts against others. You have done a job of work and feel that others have not done a similar job. So you start internal considering, though you may not express it in spoken words. Others do not have to work as you have to. Others do not see what you have done. No one appreciates you, and so on. All this arises from not doing what you have to do from yourself, not you yourself willing what you have to do. Whatever you have to do, will to do it, and you will get through the job without becoming negative, and so without being tired and without making internal accounts. We have to be reminded of this constantly, and you all are reminded of it constantly, for it is one of the great secrets of right work on oneself. Not only that, it makes force in you. Perhaps nothing destroys one's understanding of the work as much as internal considering. This making of inner accounts against others, with all the resulting self-pity and damp, negative states, which, as it were, turn one's whole psychological country into marshland filled with venomous mosquitoes. Now, if I will to do what I have to do, I will not make inner accounts against others. But if I do what I have to do, and all the time think that someone else should do it, and that it is unfair that I should have to do it, then I am making internal accounts. That is, I am internally considering. And this will give rise to endless inner talking in myself, a sort of inner muttering and complaining and brooding that will go on and on by itself, for the sign of the negative part of emotional center working is that it all goes on and on by itself, a sort of perpetual, secret grievance that may spread over and darken all one's inner life. We know that we have to protect our outer life, our bodies, from assault. Yet, even more important, we have to protect our inner psychological life, our psychological body, from assault, and a much more dangerous form of assault. For a man may preserve his outer physical life, but not have any idea that he has to protect his inner psychological life. So he gets narrow, hard, sour, stiff, bitter, revengeful, jealous, moody, tiresome, and so on. In other words, he lives in his body, but is dead inwardly in himself. However his body may appear, the work will say, this body is alive, but he himself is internally a failure and is dead. He is a walking dead man. All this, of course, applies to women as well. How many dead, Mr. Ouspensky said, walk the streets? So it is necessary to observe internal considering and notice what it is and try to control it. This will lead to psychological health. Notice your inner talking. Notice what obsesses your thoughts. Taste it and see whether it is negative. Try to struggle with it. Hate it. Try to wake up and do what you have to do from yourself willingly. Only one person can live your life, and that's yourself. But are you on the box of your own carriage, and have you reins? Otherwise, you cannot will anything. You all probably have heard that extraordinary esoteric remark attributed to Christ, resist not evil. It has many remarkable meanings. One is to will what you think evil, what you think you dislike, what you think should not be. You think you may die. Will it, and you will no longer be afraid. To object to everything is easy. To will what you object to is another thing. If you object to everything, you will internally consider all day. You will make internal accounts against everyone. But if you will the existence of someone you object to, everything will change miraculously. If you will what happens to you, you will gain force. If you object to what happens to you, you will lose force. This work is about how to gain force. Part 2. You have heard many times that this work is esoteric Christianity. Exoteric Christianity, belonging to different sects and rituals and so on, is one thing. Esoteric Christianity connects with all former esoteric teaching and is about the inner meaning of fragments handed on to us so inadequately of the teaching of a conscious man who taught some 2,000 years ago. Christ was number 8 man, but we have very little reported of what he taught, and most of what we have in the Gospels is by people who never knew Christ and no doubt added or distorted things to fit their own views. Now there is a parable preserved in one Gospel only about internal considering and how to prevent it, starting on oneself. All internal considering arises chiefly from false personality in people more than anything else. Christ attacked the Pharisee and so on, and the Pharisee who did all things to be seen of men is not one of a group of people who lived centuries ago, but something in yourself. Now, in you, now. That is, the Pharisee in you that pretends to be what he really is not at heart. To realize one is almost nothing is to overcome the false personality, the Pharisee. Now, the false personality blows us up into an enormous self-importance, like that frog in the fairy story that finally burst. It is this overvaluing of ourselves that causes a lot of internal considering. The disciples of Christ ask, increase our faith. Now faith is a force to believe beyond the evidence of the senses, force to lift one above one's mechanical reactions, force to understand that there is something above one's limited human understanding, force to do this work. Christ answers this question of how to increase one's force to understand above one's merely natural understanding by a parable. And the apostles said unto the Lord, increase our faith. And the Lord said, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye would say unto this sycamine tree, be thou rooted up, and be thou planted in the sea, and it would have obeyed you. But who is there of you, having a servant, plowing or keeping sheep, that will say unto him, when he is come in from the field, Come straightway and sit down to meat, and will not rather say unto him, Make ready therewith I may sup, and gird thyself and serve me, till I have eaten and drunken, and afterward thou shalt eat and drink? Doth he thank the servant because he did the things that were commanded? Even so, ye also, when ye shall have done all the things that are commanded you, say, We are unprofitable servants. We have done that which it was our duty to do. Luke 17:5-9. Now notice that it would be quite possible for the servant to make internal accounts, such as, Why should I have to work all day and then serve you who have not had a hard day, as I have?